the signals are there. And listen, we know that this shot can produce myocarditis.
Yeah.
And the problem with myocarditis is it can be subclinical. And so if a pilot is diagnosed with myocarditis, that's a career ender.
Yeah.
The pilot is not allowed to be issued a medical certificate because, there could be the possibility of sudden cardiac failure. So it's a hard line in the sand, and it's a safety issue, you see.
How many of you knew all that was happening in commercial aviation? Hey everyone, our country is at a severe inflection point in the aviation industry and also in the culture itself. We take the wrong turn and the consequences may be unrecoverable. We maintain aircraft control, analyze the situation, and take the proper action, and we can recover this unusual attitude. Aviators, you know what I mean.
There has to be hard lines in the sand for safety.
Yeah.
And there are some hard lines, but unfortunately, some of those lines are being broken.
Yeah, we're gonna during the course of our careers, we both saw, particularly in maybe the last 10 years, some significant signs of degradation to the industry beginning to happen. And then we began to see the rise of some significant medical tyranny beginning to happen when the pandemic was introduced to the world. We talked about this before. I received a career-ending ultimatum from my employer during that time, and you did too. So I walked away from my career because they wanted me to take the shot. And after seeing a lot of the things that you just mentioned, was people passing out, keeling over, listening to lots and lots of stories on the news about severe, sudden, and quick, even fatal reactions. And some of these fatalities happen within just minutes of people getting a shot.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much when.
And that's an absolute fact, Brett. And I got to tell your listening audience, there is something seriously wrong with our society when, according to the own CDC records, 1,150 people died the same day they got that shot. And this is in the United States. And some of those deaths happened in full view of people waiting in line to get theirs. And they still stayed in line.
What happened to that guy? That's not going to happen to me because I'm going to take the risk, and he wasn't lucky. And
you know how they got away with doing that? Because they scared people. They scared the daylights out of people, saying that if you come in contact with this virus, it will kill you. And the only way to protect yourself is with this shot that they're calling a vaccine. Yeah. And what's in the shot? The worst part of the virus. That's
we
what's
can talk about that here in a few minutes as well.
Why do people do that?
But I want to know, because of all these things that just happened, what we just talked about was kind of the beginning of a timeline when all this stuff started happening. So how did what happened to you and people like me and others that are in our field, how did that turn you into a medical freedom fighter? And what does that look like for you today?
Yeah, so I started speaking out immediately as soon as they let me go from the airline. I started speaking out at school board meetings and also county commissioner meetings, not only about the dangers of wearing a mask and how ridiculous it was, but also about the dangers of a vaccine. And I said, I can see signs that this is going to be mandated. And I said, this is something that we need to not do. It's against our basic rights of bodily autonomy. Everybody should have the right to decide whether they want to have a procedure like this done or not. And they need to be given informed consent, which means, you need to know what's in it and what the reactions can possibly be. And you need to have the right to refuse that. Now, all of those things that I just mentioned, Brett, are in the emergency use authorization that was given to both Pfizer and Moderna. It is in the emergency use authorization that all of these requirements must be met. You must tell the person this is experimental. you must tell the person that there are possible adverse reactions that can happen, including death, and you have the right to refuse it. And by refusing it, it should not affect your ability to continue to operate in your workplace, and it shouldn't affect your ability to get medical care. That's in the rules, Brett. And what happened? Exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite happened. The FAA, literally the day after emergency use authorization was given to Pfizer, which was on December the 11th, 2020, the FAA made the announcement that it is safe for all pilots and air traffic controllers to go out and get this shot, and it will not affect their ability to hold their medical certificate, which is required for them to either be an air traffic controller or a pilot. And that goes directly against their guidance, Brett. We can talk about what the guidance is, but that goes directly against it. Why did that happen? We need to find out.
I totally remember when that came out, and I was just in absolute disbelief.
Joining us now is someone who's fighting hard for one group affected by all this, and that's airline pilots. He's a pilot himself and a proud veteran, president of US Freedom Flyers, Josh Yoder. Josh, great to see you, and thank you for what you're doing here. Tell us about the situation with respect to airline pilots.
Yeah, Steve, thanks for having me on. You know, the organization U.S. Freedom Flyers was started in August of 2021 to stand up against the looming federal mandates. In large part, we had a tremendous amount of success, but there were certainly airlines that did fire their employees. And the amount of devastation that has been caused has been tremendous. I spoke just today, actually, with several pilots who have been fired, and their lives have been turned upside down. You know, some of them have lost their families, they've lost their homes, they've lost everything over something that was a complete lie. You know, the Biden administration lied to us. They illegally mandated an emergency use authorization drug, and the companies jumped on board.
Is there any sign, just in the area you're working on, that these pilots are going to be where do they stand? What are the airlines saying? Are they ashamed of what they did?
They're not ashamed. At least they're not publicly ashamed. It's caused tremendous damage. You know, we're seeing an incredible increase in mental health claims, suicides, and other issues among pilots. It's been quite devastating. It's
disgusting what they did. Is there any legal recourse? I mean, what can we do about this?
There certainly is legal recourse. Something that's been on the books, a law that's been on the books for years in the United States, says that it is illegal to mandate an emergency use authorization drug. And I think this is the thing that we really need to pull the attention to. What they did was in fact criminal. They broke the law when they did it, and there must be accountability. And that's what U.S. Freedom Flyers is really focused on, not only caring for the people who've been affected on a personal level, but also bring the litigation, specifically going after the Federal Aviation Administration. Had they done their job, no pilot in this country would ever have been allowed to take an emergency use authorization drug. There's a major safety component there that was broken.
I found out that you were involved with the Freedom Flyers as well. And now, just recently, you've taken on a big new role with that organization. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I decided to take on the role as vice president of U.S. Freedom Flyers. And, you know, the reason is because I feel that I have the communication skills to talk to not only people within the FAA, but people on government levels as well about how the rollout of this shot has significantly affected aviation safety. And I think the FAA is fully aware of this. In fact, they put out a SAFO, which stands for Safety Alert for Operators. They put this out in March of 2023, indicating that there was a significant uptick in aircraft incursions, which basically means aircraft getting too close to one another. And this could happen for a number of reasons. It could be brain fog on behalf of a controller, or it could be a pilot error. It could be fatigue. It could be a staffing issue. It could also be tied to the shot, because we know that the shot can cause adverse reactions, including brain fog and blood clotting, which can affect your ability to think. It can also cause strokes, seizures, things that you do not want happening to a pilot when they're in control of an aircraft.
I just
including,
remember
heart attack.
that
Yeah.
you started talking about it too with some of the things about different symptoms like brain fog and different
Mhm.
indicators
Yeah.
like runway incursions, other particular problems. I do remember, at one point there was an uptick that we began to notice in that mysterious single pilot accident.
Yeah.
You can't really figure out what happened, even though
No.
you do the toxicologies and everything. Those are really hard to nail down unless
Yeah.
the pilot, calls out, talks to air traffic control about, what they're experiencing. But you've got this single pilot accident, and then all of a sudden, nobody knows what to do about it.
Yeah. Well, the same thing happened in the military. Literally the month after that, SAFO came out from the FAA warning, all passenger carrying airlines about this uptick in safety signal. Literally the next month, General James McConville, who was Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, grounded all Army aviators for 1 month.
Yep.
And they did that because there were, as you said, some of these things are single pilot, operations that are happening. Well, there were crashes and people died and they couldn't figure out
Yep.
why. And so they thought maybe it was a training problem. So they just brought everything to a grinding halt. So yeah, they recognize that there's a problem there also. And so there is what looks to be a significant increase in pilot incapacitations at major airline carriers all over the world. We're seeing that because they're being reported in various substacks that are, publicly available.
Right.
One of them
Right.
is Dr. William Macus, that's up in Canada, who's kept a very good track record of pilot incapacitations.
That's
and
good.
so through U.S. Freedom Flyers, we have a FOIA request directly to the FAA, to their CAMI, it's called. It's the Civil Aerospace
Familiar.
Medical Institute, where they keep track of pilot incapacitations. And we have asked for that database. We want to see all pilot incapacitations that have happened in the United States airspace. And I asked for this on Valentine's Day. And we're months down the road, and I have not gotten a response from them. And we're going to take a significant look at that data and see if there is a signal in there. We feel that there is, and then we need to talk to Congress about this. I would encourage, anyone listening to this, action steps to take. Number one, please join usfreedomflyers.org. You do
Absolutely.
not have to be a pilot. We are there to protect everyone, including the traveling public. So join usfreedomflyers.org. That way you'll be able to keep up on what we're doing on this front. And we plan to bring a lawsuit against the FAA to hold them accountable for what they've done, because pilots have died that should not have died, Brett. And I've got the data on this.
Mm-hmm.
I've tied pilot names to obituaries that, clearly show that they were pilots for these airlines, and they died young. They died before the normal retirement age of 65. Now, that does happen, but it doesn't happen with the frequency that started happening right after this shot rolled out in June 2021. There was a 40% increase. That's not normal. So I'm telling you, there is a definite tie-in to this shot and early pilot deaths, and I feel that there is a tie-in also with pilot incapacitations. Now, how do we prove that? Well, we have to do what's called data collection. And, Brett, you were in the FAA. You know how it works. It's all about data collection. They have a huge data safety base called this SMS, Safety Management System. Everything goes into that database, and they're looking for signals. And mainly what they're tracking is, aircraft stuff, the parts, what happens to aircraft, any emergencies, engine failures, parts wearing out prematurely. But what are they not checking? Personnel. And they should be. They're not even keeping track of who got the shot, when they got it, and when their last one was, and did they get a booster shot or not.
Yeah.
It's not part of a pilot's medical record, and it should be. Why? Because we know for a fact that one of the major adverse reactions of any of these mRNA shots, I don't care which one it is, all of them, it's myocarditis. And myocarditis is a hard safety line in the sand for pilots. If you're diagnosed with myocarditis, you cannot get a medical certificate, which means you cannot fly an airplane of any kind, even a small Cessna.
Well, Kevin, let me dig into that a little bit more, because I totally agree with you on that one. And it kind of indicates a shift in the FAA's narrative.
Yeah.
One thing that I learned quite a while ago, I guess shortly after I got out, and one of the actions that the FAA did that really set me off, I think was a gigantic safety of flight mistake. At one point, I think probably in October of 22, and you'll know that even a little bit more than me, I'm sure, we had a change to the heart checks in the annual physical, the flight physical. I'll be putting up a slide over top of us here that's going to show for the audience what that PR interval is. And it's just one of the segments of the heartbeat before you get the big impulse that drives all the blood around. But one of the things that's interesting about that is that for decades, that PR interval was 200 milliseconds. And then you just mentioned it a while ago, pilots started getting myocarditis and other things that were symptomatic. And so they would go in for their annual physical, and lo and behold, for the first time in their entire lives, in their entire career, they flunked their physical because that PR interval, they didn't make it in time. They were extended beyond that for the requirement. And then pilots would go on long-term disability. So we've got pilots failing their flight physicals. We've got people going on long-term disability. And now the FAA is getting wind of this because all that's being reported up chain. And the FAA says, we have got to do something about this or the national airspace system is going to collapse. We're not going to have enough pilots because the companies, the federal government, contractors, everybody is making pilots get this shot, job or jab, or they're going to just lose those pilots. So what was your experience? And also we've got proof of that in the receipts, if you will, that Aerospace Medical Examiner Guide in 2022, it shows where they changed that wording from 200 milliseconds, boldface, 300 milliseconds. Talk to me about that.
So we really looked into that very deeply, Brett, and we did find evidence that they were talking about changing the PR interval and allowing pilots to go beyond that 0.2 well before COVID happened. They started talking about this in 2016 and 2017. But it wasn't in their manual. It wasn't in print in the manual. We're still trying to figure out why they were doing this back before 2021, but they didn't update the manual until October of 2022. They're giving us some kind of a story about, well, it was just a typographical error, blah, blah, blah. And their reasoning for extending the PR interval was because it was going to cause the pilot to go through extra testing that's extremely expensive, and we wanted them to save that cost. Okay, well, and they said, back in 2016, 2017, that there was no indication of extended PR intervals being associated with pilot incapacitations. Maybe that was true then, but is it true now? And that's what we're trying to find out, Brett. There's a way that we can tie in aircraft incapacitations with known heart issues in pilots. That database is available, and we're going to be able to do that, and we're going to nail this down for sure. So in the charts that you're going to show, Brett, I looked at the charts, and you've got a graph there of an EKG, and it does show the PR interval. And as you said, that's a delay time to get the blood from the upper chambers of the heart, which are the atria, into the lower chambers of the heart. before the blood gets pumped out to the entire body through the left ventricle or to the lungs through the right ventricle. So that's a delay time. And as you said, it's been written in stone that the normal time is 0.12 to 0.2 seconds. Now, we do know that it can be normal for that PR interval to extend all the way out to 0.3, but it happens in pilots that are older because of an aging process, and it can also happen in younger pilots that are called what's having something called high vagal tone, which is something that can be measured. But they're not doing any of this, Brett. And if you look at the AME guidance, it says as long as there are no symptoms and the PR interval has extended to 0.3, you're okay to go. That's not safe. And the reason is because we now know that myocarditis can be something that extends the PR interval. It can be one thing. Exactly. Now, you can't look at an EKG and see the PR interval extended and say, oh, the pilot has myocarditis. No, you can't do that. You have to do additional testing. And so that's what we're saying. It's not safe right now just to say that because you have an extended PR interval up to 0.3, that the pilot is okay and good to go. No, there could be subclinical myocarditis that's hiding there. Now, the research has already been done on this. They did a study of over 1,500 athletes at college universities. These are young, healthy people, over 1,500 looking for myocarditis after they got the shot. And they found that about 2.3% of them did, and over half of those had completely asymptomatic conditions. They didn't even know they had it. So that's a problem, Brett. If those facts that they developed and they researched already are true in young athletes, it could also be true in pilots. But we don't know.
Well, okay. So, look, Kevin, if I'm a pilot with subclinical myocarditis, and let's say my heart check there on my flight physical was like 275 milliseconds, I don't even know I'm sick.
Right.
What could happen to me?
Well, you could have sudden heart failure. And this is known because when you get into what's called a flight or fight response, which we kind of talked about earlier, where we said that aviation is hours and hours and hours of boredom interspersed with a few seconds of stark terror. When you get that surprise, in the cockpit, and your adrenaline kicks in, and that calls for an increased heart rate, and it also causes an increase in blood pressure. A number of things start happening in the heart, and if you have subclinical myocarditis, you could have areas in the heart that are called ectopic foci, and these are like their own little pacemakers that are abnormally in the heart. Everybody knows the heart has a pacemaker. It's called the sinoatrial node. It's up in the atrium. That's what normally will pace the rhythm of your heart. But if you've got myocarditis, you can have these little independent pacemaker areas, and that can be a problem because it can send the heart into what's called either an atrial or a ventricular fibrillation. Well, what's that mean? It means that the heart is still beating, but it's basically twitching. It's not pumping the blood. And within a few seconds, you will lose consciousness. And if that heart is not shocked back into proper rhythm with an emergency device that's called an automatic external defibrillator, which is required to be on all passenger aircraft now, that person will die. And I believe we've had this happen a couple of times now in the cockpit. We had one pilot that I know of that died in the cockpit. Was it a result of the shot? No way to know because they didn't do an autopsy. Yeah. But it's entirely possible, and it's happening.
And if you extend that search beyond America, and you look at some of the airlines from other countries, you can see that same thing happening. Is the quote unexplained
worldwide
death
we had
of the pilot in the cockpit.
Worldwide in 1 week's time, and this was back in August of 2023. We had 3 pilots die while they were on duty
Yeah.
at work. 3 of them. That's highly unusual.
So what could happen if you get one of these episodes, say in a critical phase of flight, like takeoff or landing? What's the danger that could happen there?
Well, we're trained for this, Brett. All pilots are trained for this.
Right.
It's called a emergency.
Just incapacitated crew.
Exactly, and we're trained to handle that. The problem is if both pilots have subclinical myocarditis and the other pilot overreacts, you could have the possibility of both
Same thing.
pilots, losing consciousness at a critical phase of flight. Now, I admit that that's going to be extremely rare, but what I alluded to earlier in the program was that seizures are also an adverse effect of this shot. And I believe that that's going to be more of a danger to safety of flight. Before we continue into this scary segment, I just want to remind everybody that flying is still inherently safe. It's very safe, and we want to keep it that way. And U.S. Freedom Flyers, we are dedicated to being really the only FAA watchdog right now that is focused on pilot health and medical standards and reporting on these things to keep flying safe. So that's our goal. That's our mission. And so we need to call for immediate cessation of all mRNA injections that go into flight teams. And I'll give you a very easy biological explanation for why that is. The delivery systems that they're using in this mRNA technology is something that's called a lipid nanoparticle. And basically it's a large fat bubble. Now, inside that larger fat bubble, there are smaller fat bubbles. And those are proprietary. Moderna has theirs, and Pfizer has theirs. But inside those proprietary fat bubbles, which are toxic, by the way, they are known to be toxic. And if you look them up, they're not even supposed to be used in veterinary medicine. They're that toxic. But they got into these shots because of the emergency use authorization. So anyway, the messenger RNA that is inside these little fat bubbles, when it gets released into the cytoplasm of the cell, it has the instructions to make a protein. It's a foreign protein. Well, any cells that are making foreign proteins are going to be attacked by your immune system. That's just how it's designed to work. And so if you're injecting something into the body to make foreign proteins on purpose, those cells are going to be attacked and they're going to be destroyed. Now, this can happen in localized areas of the body. For example, if it happens in the heart musculature, you're going to end up with myocarditis. Could be subclinical myocarditis. Could be something that could result in sudden cardiac failure. Okay? Or it could happen all over the body. And that's called multi-inflammatory syndrome because it can affect all tissues of the body. And the reason, Brett, is because of the delivery system that they're using. That bigger lipid nanoparticle that I talked about is non-toxic. It's made of normal body fats. It's made out of cholesterol, and the other one is DSPC. That's the same stuff that your body cells are made of. And it was designed that way so that it would literally go everywhere. And it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And literally any cell that these bigger lipid nanoparticles bump into, they will merge. And that allows the smaller lipid nanoparticles to get inside of the cytoplasm. And when those smaller lipid nanoparticles dissolve, which is what they're designed to do, they're designed to dissolve under certain pH conditions. That's the acidity of your cell. The mRNA gets released and it starts making this foreign protein. So all of this mRNA technology, all of it is going to be making what are called, I call them bioactive proteins. And what do I mean by that? Well, a bioactive protein is one that when it gets made and released from the cell and gets into your blood or your lymph, it is going to attach to cellular receptors. It's not going to be willingly taken in by cells. It attaches to cellular receptors. So we're talking about proteins here, okay? And these aren't like proteins that you eat or proteins
Right.
that your body is making and releasing all of the time that are used for other purposes. No, those are willingly taken in by cells, but not these proteins. These proteins are made by this synthetic messenger RNA. They are bioactive. They are going to attach to cellular receptors. Anytime something attaches to a cellular receptor, your immune system is going to attack and destroy those cells. So it
Right.
results in pathology. And it results in pathology that sometimes happens quickly or sometimes can happen over a number of years. And I think that's where we are right now, Brett. I think we're starting
Yeah.
to just see the fallout of this. And we're seeing it in aviation, particularly in the increased level of pilots going out on long-term disabilities for whatever reason.
Right.
They're getting cancers, they're getting neurological problems, they're having vascular issues. And these are things that are sneaking up on pilots, and it's taking a long time for some of these things to show up, but they are showing up in greater and greater numbers.
Exactly.
And you know, if we allow this stuff to continue to go into flight crews, then we're going to continue to have the problem. And the biggest problem, and you mentioned it, is the booster shot, because we now know that the more booster shots you get, the greater your chances are of having what's called an IgG shift, an immunoglobulin shift that happens in your body. And basically what that does is it tells your immune system to stand down. It just stands down. It doesn't even attack the viruses that are going to come through and the bacteria.
So-
and that's why people are more susceptible to getting chronic
Right.
illnesses now. This is all.
So the more booster shots you get, the worse your
Yeah.
immunology is, and your immune
Yeah.
system is basically non-functional after several of
Exactly.
those.
You're making your immune system weaker over time, is what you're
With
doing.
every shot.
And it also targets your immune system to look for the wrong thing.
Yes.
You're injecting something to make a protein, and it makes lots and lots of that protein. I mean, billions of these little protein particles start floating
spikes.
around, and your immune system will make antibodies against that. That's what your immune system is designed to do. It makes antibodies against that foreign protein. Well, you're injecting a foreign protein that doesn't even exist anymore. It's outdated. So it's training your immune system to look for the wrong thing. It's looking for what you're injecting. It's not looking for what actually exists. And people don't get that. They need to understand that. You know, let me give you another little philosophical tidbit to think about.
You bet.
You know, antibodies are very powerful things. They are. They can save your life. For example, if you're bitten by a rattlesnake, okay, you go to the hospital, and what do? They inject you with anti-venom. Anti-venom is antibodies. That's what they are. Where did they get those antibodies? They got those antibodies from an animal that was bitten by a rattlesnake and developed perfect antibodies against rattlesnake venom. All of it, all parts of the venom, all of it. But it's a perfect antibody because it came from an animal that experienced the entire thing. Same thing with rabies, okay? If you're bitten by an animal that has a rabies infection, the first thing they do is they put rabies antibodies in you that they got from an animal that experienced the rabies virus. All of it, the whole thing. So yes, antibodies are a very powerful thing and they can save your life. But I will tell you, and this is from the training and the research that I've done, The only way that you can get that kind of an antibody is by experiencing a natural infection.
Right.
It has to come in your body in a natural way through the barrier that separates the inside of you from the outside. It's called the epithelial barrier. And by doing so, when your body experiences that, it memorizes the entire thing, whatever it is, the whole bacteria, all parts of it, the whole virus, all parts of it, so that if any part of that virus or bacteria changes in the future, your immune memory still has enough there to recognize the new variant, and it keeps you protected. That's what immunity is. But what are we doing with this technology? We're injecting something through the barrier. We're ignoring the barrier. And we're telling the immune system to focus on just this one little part of it, not the whole thing. And by doing so, you're retraining your immune system, and it's not able to see the other things that are out there.
So you're not only not protecting against what you wanted to protect against, so you thought, but you're also destroying your immune system so that everything else goes bad.
Everything else can get through as well, because you're retraining and focusing your immune system on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And why is this happening? Because you're injecting this platform that creates, as I said, billions and billions of these suboptimal antibodies.
Yeah.
That's not a natural thing to do. We should not be doing this. And
we're totally on the wrong vector in that regard.
We are,
in my opinion.
And so we got to stop these injections from going into all flight crews looking forward.
I think you're right. And I would think that the freedom flyers would be able to put out the word and just help as many flight crews as possible do this.
Yeah,
there is hope. We've got to get our flight crews well. I think we've been talking for many minutes here about some of the bad things that are happening with respect to the so-called vaccine, but treatments are available. So we've got to get our flight crews, we've got to get our flight attendants, the wrench tuners, air traffic controllers, anybody that's been affected in the aviation industry by this gene therapy. We've got to get them fixed. And so, what steps can we take, to fix this horrible mess?
Now, I mentioned U.S. Freedom Flyers for people to consider joining, because we do have a way to connect people that have vaccine injuries to medical services that we have found and we have investigated, and they have protocols that are definitely showing improvement. And so we can make connections with people directly to medical service providers. Some of these providers you would have to visit in person. Others can work with you through telemedicine. But again, there is help available, and that's the good news. Yeah, that's the good news.